Hello folks, this is Carl's, your friendly neighborhood violin teacher. Today we are going to review very briefly the previous two videos on taking care of your violin, and we are going to tie up a few loose ends. This is actually the third of three videos on maintaining your violin. Maintaining means to take care of. Moving forward, you can actually probably hear my cat. She wants some food, which is weird because she doesn't supposed to eat for an hour, and she may even show up in the frame. Anyway, after today's video, we're going to move on in subsequent videos to tuning your violin, which is going to be its own adventure. But let's go ahead and just kick it off with a review. So again, you may notice that you are staring at a floor. We'll take care of that in a second here. So in the first video, we talked about kind of the three things you need to do to get your violin ready to play. And those things are, number one, making a little cheap ghost costume. This guy here. And then cleaning the strings between, oh, you can even see some of the cat hairs. Anyway, cleaning the strings between the bridge and the fingerboard very gently. Should take about 10 seconds, and be very gentle so you don't knock over the bridge. Cleaning the strings is number one. Number two was, of course, putting on the shoulder pad, the shoulder rest, the sponge, whatever you have available there. And then number three was to tighten your bow. Now, it's possible that I have mentioned these three things perhaps in different orders. I've probably talked about cleaning the strings, putting on the shoulder pad or the shoulder rest or the sponge, and tightening your bow. The order in which you do them doesn't really matter, which is kind of nice. So just be sure that you do all three of them before you practice, and then do the opposite of the three of them. That's right, I guess. Cleaning the strings, there is no opposite of that for us. Yeah, you can dirty your strings, but that's not the point. So clean your strings again would be, so there's no opposite for that. When you're done practicing, clean your strings again, loosen your bow, that's what I'm doing right now, and of course, take off your shoulder rest or your pad or your sponge. Okay, so that is pretty much video one in a nutshell. Video two was a review of the stuff that belongs in your violin case. So then a quick review is, well, you can begin with our case itself. Here's our case. Of course, in it, we should have our violin. Gently put away there. We should have our bow locked down. Make sure you have this little doorknob thing here locked down. And we should have, of course, our cleaning cloth. Now, when you put your cleaning cloth away, remember it's cut from a t-shirt. The cleaning cloth, I usually cover the bridge and as much of the body of the instrument as I can. Your bow's probably not going to fall out, but let's say you close the lid, maybe you forget to use the doorknob to latch it down or whatever, and you close the lid, and then the bow falls off. At least this way, if the bow falls off, it won't scratch the violin. It happens pretty rarely, but I have actually had occasions where I've closed the lid to my actual, like my performing violin, and somehow the bow got jiggled off the lock or something, and kind of, I find it sitting on top of my instrument. So anyway, the cleaning cloth also keeps your instrument protected when it's in the case. So anyway, cleaning cloth there. Of course, the pad, if you're able to put it somewhere, you can stick it in there like this. This is where I keep it for my daughter, but a lot of people typically, instead of keeping that there, they keep the rosin in the case as well. And you can kind of find a little kind of clever way to keep the maybe the pad underneath, but this is really risky. Remember, the whole point is to be safe, so that way when you close the lid, you don't crush your violin. So I don't recommend, in fact, don't be a hero and don't be an explorer with trying to find the best solution. If it can't safely fit in your case, then that's why we use a tote bag. Oh, I forgot something too. Because in addition, we have Right, the cleaning cloth. Now your cleaning cloth can almost always fit here. I can't imagine a situation where it wouldn't, as long as it's nicely folded. So, our rosin, our pad, and our tuner. So if these things don't fit in here, then that's why we have Mr. Tote Bag. I don't actually have a name for my tote bag. Anyway, that's why we have a tote bag. So stick that stuff in there, and then everything's all together. So that's everything that belongs in your case and or your tote bag. Nothing else should be in here. So in other words, don't keep other school papers right now. Don't keep pens or pencils. Don't keep your lunch. Like, that's a terrible idea, right? That actually reminds me of taking care of food. I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, basically only the things that I mentioned, only the things that I've mentioned here should go in your case and or your tote bag. Don't be adventurous and put other stuff, because if it damages your violin, your family gets to pay for the damages. So none of us want that. Okay, so we also talked about how to make a cleaning cloth, which I'm not going to restate here because we've all seen the video. But remember that you basically cut a t-shirt in a foot by foot square, and then you cut that square in half. Remember, you guys will probably remember I did a terrible job with this one. This is not a square at all. Sorry, it's half of a square, but of course there's this huge chunk missing. This looks like anyone's geography is good. Is this one Vermont? Is this the state of Vermont? Kind of like this. And then if it's like this, it's like New Hampshire. Anyone with geography? Anyway, so we reviewed how to make a cleaning cloth, and you can do that for free as long as you find a cheap t-shirt, and of course a t-shirt that your parents are okay with you using, right? Let's see, and then we had, oh right, of course, inspecting your instrument. So part of getting used to playing right is checking, of course, that the bridge is appropriately, the bridge isn't warped or bent forward. Remember we talked about, we don't want a bridge having this kind of weird shape, or like that weird shape or something. Checking that the fine tuners are not digging or drilling or scratching the surface of the violin. There should be space, and you can see here where my finger is. There's definitely space between the fine tuners and the violin here, so that's good. So that's the second thing. And the third thing was to inspect the jaw rest itself to make sure the jaw rest is not jiggly. So again, bridge, fine tuners, and the jaw rest. So then the last thing we talked about in that section was what to do if you discover that something is damaged. And let's review that very, very quickly here. So if you discover that something is damaged, number one, do not try to repair the damage yourself. It doesn't matter what it is. Do not try to repair the damage yourself, and do not try to cover it up. That's just not responsible. And like, for me personally, like, I don't know what the situation is anyway, I'm not going to be mad, as your violin teacher, I'm not going to be mad at you or angry with you or whatever if you damage something. We have to learn how to take care of it, so just be super careful. So don't worry about getting in trouble. I promise you, if there's damage on your instrument and you tell your parent or guardian right away that you noticed something, everybody will be much happier than if, 3 weeks from now, your violin totally falls apart because you just didn't come and take care of it. Tell us right away. So, number one, don't try to cover it up, and don't try to repair the damage yourself. In fact, it's better, this is number two, tell your parent or guardian immediately when you notice the damage. Whatever it is, something looks weird, something looks odd, something breaks, who knows. If something looks strange to you on your violin, you're probably right, something probably is strange. So, number two, tell your parent or guardian immediately, and have your parent or guardian take pictures of the damage, and then have them email me the pictures of the damage and a little and then like a description. Hey, it looks like I'm trying to think of someone's name. It looks like Agnes's a really old name that no one uses anymore. It looks like Agnes's bridge fell over, or it looks like the back of Agnes's violin is cracked, or something like that. Just some kind of description of the picture itself and what to do about it, or not what to do about it, excuse me. Some description of the picture and what I should be looking for. Then email them to me, and don't worry, my email address is everywhere, so you can very easily do that. So if I get pictures of the violin and a description of what happened, and they're sent to me, then I can say, oh yeah, I can fix that. Bring it to campus, or I'll say that's way too intense. Take it to the violin shop. But in whatever case, we'll get it figured out. So that's a kind of a quick review of what to do if something breaks. So let's go kind of to the last phase of this, which maybe in retrospect should have been the first, but that's okay. Let's talk about your violin in your house. So who can handle your violin? Well, the answer is only 4 people. You, because it's your violin, your parents or guardians, me, because I'm your violin teacher, and the last kind of group of people is your private teacher. If you have, of course, most of us don't have a private teacher, which is totally fine. But if you have a private teacher, obviously your private teacher can handle your violin as well, because they're supposed to know what they're doing, right? So anyway, again, the only people who can touch your violin are you, your parents or guardians, me, and if you have a private teacher, your private teacher. When you're not practicing, where should you store your violin at home? You should store it someplace safe where perhaps little siblings or pets won't be able to get at your violin, and where it's not too hot or too cold. So like I think really good places are like under your bed, if that's possible, or in your closet. Those are both really good places. Somewhere where it's just out of the way and not going to get stepped on or played with or chewed on. And of course, when I say store, I really mean like in the case, which we'll talk about in a second. So why should you store your violin? Like, why not just leave it out all the time? Well, because violins are very expensive to buy and they're very expensive to repair. So, like, it's impossible to have like zero risk of damage. We can't guarantee nothing ever will happen to your violin in eternity, right? So we can't have zero risk. But if you store your violin properly in its case when you're not practicing, then you go a really long way to keep it from being damaged. So that's why you should store it when you're not practicing. So here's how you store your violin, it's kind of a review of what we've already talked about. When you store your violin, you should put obviously the violin and the bow into the case, and whatever else that needs to go in the case safely. Make sure it's securely shut. Make sure the lid is securely shut. Of course, the shoulder rest sponge or pad has to be removed before closing the case, so you don't crush your violin. The hoist should be loosened, and the string should be wiped down. This is all review. And you should store your violin basically anytime you're not practicing. That's pretty straightforward. And I know for you, those of you guys who are new, that you haven't been even told anything about how to play the violin. That's on purpose, because I want you guys to learn how to take care of the violin first and get really good at it before we even worry about how to put it on your shoulder, how to make a bow hold, all that other stuff. So let's talk about an unusual case as well very quickly, which is your violin in your car. I just realized that this is more like a podcast because there's nothing on the screen, but that's okay, you can still listen. Cars heat up. So let's talk about your violin in your car for a second. So cars heat up and cool down very quickly compared to a house. So rapid changes in temperature, in other words, getting really hot really fast or getting really cold really fast, that's called a fast change in temperature. That damages violins because violins are made mostly of wood with a tiny bit of metal, and wood actually gets a little bit large when the temperature goes up, and it shrinks a little bit when the temperature gets low. Actually, almost everything does, including our own bodies, a little bit. And that's actually fine. Okay, my hands, I'm gesturing now. That's actually fine for violins to do that. It's just that if they shrink or grow too quickly, then they crack. And the same thing with the glue that holds the violins together. If the glue shrinks too quickly or melts, then it won't hold the violin together. So obviously you don't want that. So it's very easy for that kind of thing to happen in the car. So your violin should spend as little time as possible in the car. If you have to travel with your violin, then the only place you should have it is on the floor in the back seat. If you, for some reason, can't put your violin on the floor of the car in the back seat, then you can put it on the back seat itself. That's fine. And obviously, of course, this may not be obvious, but let's be super safe. Sorry, just in case, to be super clear, when I say violin in your car, I mean your violin in its case in the car. Your violin must be in its case when you're traveling by car. Yes, that's so. Anyway, um, now if you have to travel, your violin, in its case, of course, should never be placed in these parts of a car. It should never be placed in the trunk or the hatch. Um, the hatch is like the trunk for cars that are like station wagons. Um, so a hatch is sort of like a trunk with a window, if that makes sense. In other words, the back of a car, the trunk or the hatch, that is the back of a car, your violin should never be placed there. Um, hopefully this will never happen, but if you get rear-ended, then say bye-bye to your violin. And I actually know, a friend of mine, actually, he and I grew up playing violin together. His family was in an accident, and he had his violin in the trunk, and he got rear-ended, and his violin, it was a $1,500, this $1,500 violin, just became firewood, just a pile of splinters. So they learned the lesson the hard way, and I learned the lesson from them. So I always keep my violin in the back seat on the floor when I travel. So again, never keep the violin in the trunk or the hatch. And also, of course, the trunk and the hatch get super hot as well, which is what we just discussed. You don't want to roast your violin either. Your violin also shouldn't belong in the front seat. Like, it should not be, with your mom or dad or your parent or guardian when they're behind the wheel. And it shouldn't be in the front passenger seat either, because if the airbag goes off, you've just turned your violin into a big rock coming at your face. So again, violins don't mix with airbags. Not to mention the violin itself will be destroyed, but for a safety issue as well. So the only place that remains is on the floor or on the back seat with you. All right. Some other kind of violin maintenance things. So this is now we've talked about your violin in your house, we've talked about your violin in your car, and now we're going to talk about you and your violin. So how should you treat your violin in general? Well, you should treat it like, I think a good guideline is, you should treat it like you treat a newborn baby. In other words, if doing something would hurt a newborn, then don't do that thing to your violin. And by the way, don't do that thing to a newborn either. If some place in your house, if somewhere is too hot or too cold for a newborn, then don't put your violin in that place either, and so forth. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. Would this be good? Would this hurt a newborn? Would this be uncomfortable for a newborn? Yes, then don't put it there, right? Which is a good example, right? Don't let your dogs play with your violin, because there's no way you would let a dog play with a newborn, right? That's insane. So that's what I mean. And so forth. So that's a good guideline. Treat your violin the way you would treat a newborn baby. Secondly, I can't believe I didn't mention this the whole time. This I just discovered when I was putting this video together. Wow, that I totally forgot. So let's talk about, very briefly, never, ever, ever, ever touching the horsehair, which I may have just done by mistake here. So here is the bow. You can touch every part of the bow except for this white strip here. And those of you from last year and from previous years know, but anyway, if you're new, this white strip here is horsehair. And I mean, it's actually horsehair. Like, at one point this hair was near a horse's butt. It came off of the tail of a horse. That's not a joke. That's not anything. That's totally real. Now, for those of you who like horses, by the way, I'm not particularly fond of horses. I don't hate them or dislike them. There's never been interesting to me. Anyway, this does not hurt. We do not hurt horses by taking off the horsehair, right? It's sort of like, I'm sure, well, during COVID, I'm sure none of us get haircuts. But anyway, back in the day when we got haircuts, right, it doesn't hurt to get your hair cut. It's the same thing with the horse. All we do is just cut the hair off their tails, and then the hair grows back. So don't worry. Even though it's real horsehair, we don't hurt the horses to get it. So you can rest easy. However, I want to remind you too that because it's near a horse's butt, sometimes horsehair has pee on it, and they do try to wash it off the best they can, but you never know. I remember last year, I remember somebody licked the horsehair of their bow, which was like the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So please don't do that, because remember, it's horsetail. It's horsetail's hair. We don't know where this has been, but so that's kind of weird. Anyway, so don't do that. Anyway, but specifically, don't touch the horsehair either. You can touch any other part of the bow, but don't touch the horsehair, because the horsehair is the horsehair. We have oils on our fingers. Even when our hands are clean, the oils on our fingers stick to the horsehair, and when they stick to the horsehair, they do not allow rosin to stick to the horsehair, which means that your bow is not going to grip the strings. That means you're not going to get a good sound. So don't touch the horsehair of your bow, which actually reminds me, we'll get to that in a second here. So we can take a second now, actually. No, we'll do that later. That's the plan. So never touch the horsehair of your bow. You can touch everything else, just not there. Violins are happiest between 68 degrees and 72 degrees. That's basically room temperature. And they're best in a relative humidity of 40 to 60%. If you don't know what I just said, that's okay. Ask your parent or guardian. Again, room temperature is the best for violins, and a relative humidity of 40 to 60%. Believe it or not, I think we actually are almost done, guys. This is great. Yeah, I think we're just about done. So actually, it is the last thing here that I can tell. Let's see. Quick. Yeah, good. Yeah, we're just about done. Let's talk about rosining your bow. So we did before. Here is a cake of rosin. Here's the lid that goes with it. I remember, a quick review, right? It's called a cake of rosin because the shape is what we call a cake. I know that doesn't make any sense to you guys, but that's how sort of the world works. So anyway, this is called a cake of rosin because of its shape. Do not eat it. It is poisonous. I'm serious. Especially under COVID, if you get sick because you've eaten rosin, no one wants to go to the emergency room in general, but especially during COVID stuff. So please, it's not a joke. Do not eat the rosin. It is not food. It is poison. It is hard, crunchy, like solid poison. Don't eat it. Anyway, you notice that this rosin is actually pretty brand new. You can tell because it's shiny. Oh, I don't have sandpaper, but anyway, you don't want your rosin to stay shiny. If it's shiny, it's not going to help you out. So what you do is you take a little tiny bit of sandpaper. Pretend I have sandpaper. And if you don't know what sandpaper is, that's okay. Ask your parent or guardian. I'm sure you guys have some lying around. Take some sandpaper and then just scrub the top of the rosin. Scrub. And what you'll see is that you'll ruin this nice shiny surface, and instead it'll become sort of white and dusty and powdery. That's what you want. You want the shiny surface to become white and dusty and powdery. Then it's ready to be used. But for right now, we're going to pretend. So here's your bow. To put rosin on your bow, you cover your thumb. You cover the ferrule with your thumb. Now I am touching the bottom of the horsehair a tiny bit. That's okay. That's not going to hurt anything way down there. So you cover the ferrule with your thumb, and then, so I can do it this way here, you put the cake of rosin upside down onto, you notice here that the rosin, of course, is touching the horsehair, and I scrub out, and I come back in, and again, I do it again. Scrub out and in. Notice that I went out and came back twice. That's plenty. That's all you need to do. So again, I'm not actually gonna touch the horsehair this time, but that's one swipe out and back, two swipes out and back. Do that on the 15th of every month and the last day of every month. That is like about the 15th of the month and about like the 30th of the month. A couple times a month, once every 2 weeks, however you want to think about it. Your bow doesn't need much more rosin than that. Rosin is, as I said, it's not only poisonous tree sap, but its job is to make the horsehair sticky, because sticky horsehair pulls on the strings better, and that's how you get a better sound. Now, the reason why I said not too much is because it's easy to over rosin your bow. If you rosin your bow just right, it'll help give you a good sound. If you don't have enough rosin, then your sound will be sort of hazy and kind of glassy. Like it'll be sort of whispery, but not in a good way. If you use too much rosin, then your sound gets really chunky and tense, and also you cast rosin powder everywhere, so you don't want that either. So those are your two choices. Basically, don't rosin it too little. Rosin, and so what I discovered is rosining it about a couple times a month seems to be about the best way to do it. So that's how that goes. I probably missed something. Oh yeah, so coming up next time we will have, starting with your next video, we're going to talk about tuning your violin. So that'll be an adventure. But I think that's about it for right now, guys. So take care, and we'll be in touch.